Hello there. This is Shelby Shadwell, Treasurer of Wyoming Promise. Thanks for joining the call if you're on there. Everybody's muted as of this point, just because we expect a lot of folks on this call, including candidates Miller and Trauner, who will be joining us shortly here. So, again, thank you for joining. Just a couple of quick things. We're going to keep everybody muted, at least initially, but if you want to press any number on your dial pad, that will raise your hand on our visual interface, and we can actually then address your call, or your question, sorry. If anybody did hear any of that, could somebody just press a number on their dial pad? And that way I'll know that you can actually hear me, and I'm not. Okay, great. So I saw some hands go up there. So again, yes, we'll keep everybody muted initially for this conference call, Wyoming Promise conference call. And again, we look forward to having candidates Miller and Trauner on here shortly. And Ken, I believe you're unmuted. If there's anything you want to say initially, feel free to jump on in.
Oh, thank you. I'm joining the call now from Denver. We're on our way out to Cincinnati for a marathon next weekend. So we're doing some grandparent time in Denver before we head out tomorrow. But welcome, everybody. Thanks for the call. Shelby, you've got the control tonight because I don't have access to my computer, so I don't have access to the conductor link, so I have no idea how many people are on the call or who's on the call. So I'm going to rely on you to pretty much run the call, but once again, thanks everybody for being here. It's an exciting time. It's time for us to get saddled up and get to work, and candidates are starting to line up for various offices statewide and otherwise. And it's going to be great to hear from a couple of the candidates who really understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. So looking forward to hearing what Gary and Rod have to say to us. So Shelby, since you can see who's on the call and what's going on, I'm going to let you pretty much take charge here.
Sure thing. And again, this is Shelby Shadwell, the Treasurer for Wyoming Promise. And thank you to all of you for joining in on this call. We've got a really good showing thus far, and candidate Trauner is on the call. I think we'll wait for candidate Miller to get on as well. But we, just so you know, those of you that are joining the call, everybody's muted as of now and initially. But if you do have any questions, you can raise your hand pretty much at any time, and I can see that on this visual interface, and I can unmute you if you do have a question. Again, I think we'll wait another maybe another minute or so as people keep joining the call, but it's a good showing, and I'll reiterate what Ken said. Thank you all for joining this call. It's an important issue, of course, as you all know. And we wanted to have a couple of candidates on the call to basically give their thoughts on the issue of money in politics and how it affects us here in Wyoming. So I know this is a little repetitive, but as people join on, just want to say everybody's muted on the conference call initially. But if you do press a number on your dial pad, we will see basically your hand raised, and we can address your question as we go through things. So thanks again. I think we can kind of begin to get started here. So I did want to just briefly introduce our guest speakers for the evening and allow them to speak tonight, and then Ken and I can give you all an update on where we're at as far as the statewide effort goes, collecting signatures. But again, money in politics is a big issue, and we have two candidates on that have made this a pretty big part of their campaigns. So I'll just say that we have on, and I'm going to unmute these folks at this point. We do have on Rod Miller, who is a Republican candidate running against Liz Cheney in a primary here, and Gary Trauner, Democratic candidate running against John Barrasso coming up. And sorry to Rod and Gary, I don't have full introductions, but I thought this would give you both a chance to introduce yourselves and why you're running, and basically to talk a little bit about why money in politics is an issue that you're running on, and why it's important for Wyomingites to think about it. So really quickly, I've got Rod and Gary and Ken are all unmuted as well as myself, but again, folks can press a button on your dial pad and that'll show your hand goes up and you can ask a question. But let's hand it over. Let's just go first to Rod Miller. You're on the call. Introduce yourself and talk a little bit about this issue, if you would.
Hi, everybody. This is Rod Miller. I'm calling on an old coal-fired hand-crank flip phone, so I don't have all the fancy graphics and stuff. I can't see you. I hope you can hear me. Are we coming through okay?
I hear you fine, Rod.
Yes,
Great.
sir.
I appreciate the chance to be here. As you mentioned, I'm running against Liz in the Republican primary, and I don't know. The reason why I'm running is because she needs to be beat. I don't think she's doing any good for the state of Wyoming, and quite frankly, I don't think she's good for the nation. On the topic of money and politics, I'm getting a lot of mileage, you guys, on the campaign out of this story I tell about Benjamin Franklin when they were debating and drafting the Constitution in Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It was hot that summer, and all the windows were closed because they wanted privacy. They finally got the ink wasn't even dry on the Constitution, and Ben Franklin stepped outside Independence Hall to either get a breath of fresh air or a beer, depending on your view of Ben Franklin. And a woman from Philadelphia walked up to him and said, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a monarchy or a republic? And his reply was, well, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And I think this issue, money in politics, is one of the places where we go to work keeping our republic. Because if we don't, we're going to lose it. The voice of the voter, of the citizen, of the common American will be drowned out by obscene amounts of money that come from who knows where to purchase voices in Congress, shutting us out of the process. And we have to stop that and reclaim our voices, our position in democracy by getting rid of that dark money in politics. And I don't think just dark money. I think we need to go beyond that. The numbers I have seen lately are in the 2016 election for the 435 House members and the one-third of the Senate that were running. Those people were, there was $5 million worth of corporate money spent per member of Congress. And that's insane. That can't continue. We need to, as you guys are doing, I think get an amendment to the Constitution in front of both the Congress and the American voters, because Citizens United was decided as a First Amendment case. And I don't believe that Congress could pass a piece of legislation to do away with the Citizens United and all the crap that follows from it with legislation, because I think that would fail in the Supreme Court, because Citizens United was decided on a constitutional basis, a First Amendment basis. So I think the way to skin that cat is to actually amend the Constitution in some manner that states unequivocally, well, no, corporations are not people, and money is not speech. So I applaud that effort. I'm willing to do what I can to help you out, and if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, you will have a fierce and weird advocate in Congress to do just that. So, end of sermon.
Well, thank you, candidate Rod Miller. Again, as people keep joining, we've got a lot of folks on this call. That's candidate Rod Miller, who is running in the primary against Representative Liz Cheney. And right now we're kind of doing introductions. And I do want to reiterate, we wanted to have both candidates of these candidates on the call because we are a cross-partisan effort. And folks in both parties do not like dark money, out-of-state money coming into Wyoming and basically buying elections. And so now I want to turn it over to candidate Gary Trauner, who's running for Senate against John Barrasso to speak his piece and introduce himself and his campaign and what how he feels on this particular issue of money in politics. Candidate Trauner, you have the mic.
Thanks, Shelby. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for getting on the call. And first of all, I want to reiterate that I agree with everything Rod said, and I'm glad that Rod is running and doing what he's trying to do on the Republican side of the ticket in the U.S. House race, because to me, I tell people this isn't about party. I think George Washington in his farewell address in 1796, his biggest fear that he expressed in that farewell address was that people would put partisan right now. And so I tell people all the time, find folks with leadership skills and integrity and vote them in. I don't care if they're D or R or I or, frankly, if they live on the moon. That's the kind of person that we need because we don't have enough of that up in D.C. So for those of you who may not be aware, I tell people I'm not a professional politician, but I did run once or twice before. I ran for the U.S. House in 2006 against Barbara Cuban and came within a hair's breadth, less than half a percentage point, of pulling off maybe one of the biggest upsets in the country that cycle, if not in the decade. And I think one of the reasons that happened is because I've been fighting this public financing fight and this get big money out of politics fight for a long, long time. It's been ever since I've been involved in politics and public policy, 15, 20 years now, the centerpiece of what I've been trying to do is to get big money out of politics. And I think it shows, by the way, because I did get the endorsement very early on of End Citizens United. Rod referred to the Citizens United decision, which I think is a travesty. It's amazing to me that corporations are artificial entities that were created by law. They're not in the Constitution. They're legislated entities. And to me, it defies common sense to see how legislated entities have the rights of U.S. citizens. Given that, however, my view is pretty simple. Corporations can't vote. They have a very narrow focus. They want to sell their products and sell their services and make money doing that. And they're entitled to do that, but they can't vote and they shouldn't be entitled to influence our election process. To me, that's a pretty critical distinction that we've kind of lost over time. And I asked the people of Wyoming some pretty simple, basic questions that I think illustrate the power, unfortunately, of corporate money and money in politics. I asked people right off the bat, someone's got to tell me, and I hope this is a rhetorical question, who in Wyoming wants New York City hedge fund managers on Wall Street to pay lower tax rates than Wyoming teachers, miners, and ranchers? And I think the answer to that question is literally nobody except for our federal delegation because they're bought and paid for by Wall Street lobbyists. Who in Wyoming wants Medicare, the largest buyer of prescription drugs in the country, to not be able to negotiate drug prices in a market transaction with the pharmaceutical companies in order to make costs cheaper for our seniors? And I think the answer to that is probably literally nobody except for our federal delegation because Big Pharma has bought them off. So I made a pledge at the beginning of my campaign that I am not taking any corporate PAC money. I'll stand by that pledge. I've been fighting this fight for a long, long time, and I'll continue to fight that fight. It's who I am. It's what I believe in. It's not a political stance. It is intrinsic to my soul in some ways. And again, you know, my view, I tell people all the time is I'm not a professional politician. I'm dad. I'm a parent. I'm a husband. I was the COO of the hospital in my town. I've started several businesses. I know what it takes to be successful, but more than anything else, I think Rod and I will probably agree on this. You have to have a willingness to talk to folks across the aisle that you don't agree with on everything to get things done where you can find agreement and to get compromise. So to me, again, this isn't a partisan issue. This is a right and wrong issue, frankly, for our democracy, as Rod said. And I'm proud to be on this call with Rod, and I think together we can fight a good fight, and maybe we can make sure that things change a little bit up in D.C.
Jeff, if I can, let me jump in here just a moment, because Trauner and I sound a lot alike. We're saying the same kinds of things, and it might be difficult for people to differentiate between us. But I want y'all to keep in mind that Gary Trauner is a smart one and Rod Miller is the good-looking one. So keep us apart.
I'll take that, Rod.
Rod, you would be the best beard in Congress if you win this race.
Certainly. Thank you, candidate Gary Trauner. Again, a Democratic candidate running against Senator John Barrasso. We've had 4 people join the call, so it's a big call. And also we have Rod Miller, candidate running in the primary against Liz Cheney, here coming up. And in the interest of cross-partisanship, we've invited them both on this call to talk about this issue and their own campaigns. We don't, as Wyoming Promise, we don't endorse candidates, but we do welcome candidates that support this issue to come along and speak about this and speak their piece on this very important issue that we're trying to get on the ballot here. So I have actually a question for each of these candidates, Rod and Gary, and that would be, for each of you, and I think we'll just keep going the way we've been going. Maybe I'll ask Rod first. How do you see money impacting, big money in politics impacting Wyoming specifically? And how do you feel about that, and why is this a local issue as well as a national issue? And I'll ask the same to Gary as well after this.
Well, it should be a local issue. Wyoming has an at-large seat. We send one person to the House of Representatives. And proportionally, that is the strongest seat in Congress. Our congressional representative in the House of Representatives represents fewer people than any other rep in Congress. So from that standpoint, it's one of the strongest seats in Congress. We're a small state, and I believe outside money targets us, thinking that if they can pile a bunch of money into the state of Wyoming, they can buy a seat in Congress. And how do I react to that? That freaking offends me. That, pardon my French, that pisses me off. If Liz Cheney's first FEC filing a month or so ago, as of that point in the campaign, she had raised $400,000 for her reelection campaign. 2.6% of that had come from the state of Wyoming. So that shows that a congressional campaign, a statewide campaign, and it's the same in the Senate. I haven't checked John Barrasso's numbers or Mike Enzie's numbers, but I would imagine there's something similar going on there. And to have that tsunami of outside money coming into Wyoming and try and buy a seat in Congress should be offensive to not only the nation, but to us in Wyoming. We're independent folks. We don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be pushed around. That's the nature of us being Wyomingites. But that is exactly what is happening with PAC money, out-of-state corporate money coming in and investing in a representative from Congress from the state of Wyoming who will go back to Washington and carry their water instead of carrying the water of the folks in Carpenter and Togety and Jeffrey City and Riverton and everywhere else. It offends me. I can't I can't say it any stronger than that because there's probably families listening.
Yes, sir. Thank you, candidate Rod Miller. Again, as we have other people continue to join the call, running against Liz Cheney in the Republican primary. Thank you for those comments. I do want to say, since we do have a lot of folks on the call, we do keep everybody muted initially, but if you do have a question, and I think we'll actually open it up to questions in a little while after we get some more comments from the candidates, just press a number on your dial pad, and that raises your hand, and we can address your question. I want to now ask the same question to candidate Gary Trauner, Democratic challenger to John Barrasso. Coming up, how does this issue of money in politics, how do you see it as affecting it being a local Wyoming issue, not just a national issue, but a local Wyoming issue?
Right, Shelby, thanks. And, first I'll just echo what Rod said, because Senator Barrasso, who is in Congress and who is in the Senate and who is in the House, obviously is a national issue, but it also impacts policies that happen in Wyoming, so it becomes a local issue. John Barrasso has also gotten 2% of his money from in-state. And, I'll just throw out a stat that Congress has a single-digit approval rating, but the re-election rate for Congress is 97%. And I think that's directly attributable to big money and dark money and corporate money. But as far as it being a local issue, in my opening talk, I mentioned some specifics that clearly impact people every day in Wyoming. It's interesting. If you turn on your tap water and brown sludge comes out, there's a direct impact to your life, and you probably know who to blame. It's your local town or your local water and sewer district. It's a lot harder for people to make that connection when decisions are made at the national level, how it impacts people at the local level. But the simple thing is, you know what? We pay higher drug prices at the local level because Congress has made decisions based on the votes of big pharma or the money of big pharma to influence them to raise prices or not allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices with drug companies. We pay higher tax rates because hedge fund managers in New York are paying lower tax rates than we do, and we have to make up the difference somewhere. And, we have corporate offshore tax havens. We have laws passed to allow for people to put money offshore and to hide money from taxes. And you know what? That costs the rest of us money. So these issues are absolutely local issues. They impact people's pocketbooks every day. It impacts their buying decisions every day. When we get in tariffs and trade wars and we have protectionism that protects certain industries at the expense of others, the only people that lose in that are consumers, right? And when big money comes in on one side, I'll give you another example, I think, which is net neutrality and big corporations. So we just got rid of net neutrality at the national level, and that allows large companies that control the pipes that have traffic on the internet to determine who pays what and to make it unequal. So if they think you should pay more in a small business in Riverton or Douglas or DuBois, you're going to have to pay the price because big money came in there and they people in Congress decided to follow that. So it may be hard sometimes to make that direct connection, but it's pretty clear that there are everyday things that we deal with that are more expensive or that don't work as well because of the decisions made by Congress and both folks that have been bought by big money.
Thank you, candidate Gary, Democratic challenger to John Barrasso, coming up here. Ken Pestek, our chair of Wyoming Promise, does have his hand up, so feel free to chime in, Ken.
Thank you, and thank you both to Rod and to Gary for what you're doing, and it's so important to raise this issue and run on it. I just wanted to point out that the last time we had a U.S. Senate seat open in Wyoming was 2014 when Mike Enzi was reelected. His opponent in that race was Charles Hardy, who ran a grassroots shoestring operation, which turned into a documentary, which has been shown around the state a little bit, and hopefully we'll get to see it around the state some more. But at the very end of that movie, there's a graphic that says during the 2014 campaign, Charlie raised and spent something like $30,000 in this race, and Mike Enzi raised $3 million. And my question to both candidates is, how do you spend $3 million in a Wyoming Senate race when you have a very underfunded opponent?
Well, can I take that? This is Gary. And
yes,
Rod,
sure,
I hate to butt in, but, since it's a Senate question, maybe I'll just start with that, and then Rod can pile on with whatever he thinks is the right answer. Look, it's expensive. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. If I have any chance to unseat Senator Barrasso, I have to raise several $1 million. Now, I don't know how much Senator Enzi actually spent. I know he raised $3 million.
Right.
But they spend money to raise their profile, right? I mean, that's to stay in power. That's what they want to do. And the unfortunate circumstance is that Citizens United is the law of the land right now. And so if you want to support a candidate that wants to change that dynamic and wants to make sure that we do get big money out of politics, candidates cannot unilaterally disarm or they have no chance of winning. So End Citizens United, which some of you guys might be familiar with, it's a PAC, right, that raises money for candidates that have sworn not to take corporate PAC money and to get big money out of politics. They recognize that the only way to get that done is to get smaller dollar donations from across the spectrum, and across the country if we can. So Ken, the folks that are in power are building a nest egg while they're there because they're senators, and they can do that. And they can basically shake down corporate PACs and build up their war chest. Folks like Charlie Hardy and Rod Miller and myself have a challenge. And, Charlie's a great guy, but I'm just going to tell it flat out. Charlie obviously had absolutely no chance to win that race because he didn't have the resources he needed to do that. So I want to make sure this is clear because I may believe what I believe, but I am not willing to unilaterally disarm in order to tilt at windmills, okay? I want to win so I can actually make a difference. So to me, it's unfortunate that Senator Enzi felt like he had to, spend $3 million in a race when someone else spent $30. I'm guessing that wasn't necessary, but I'm also guessing that's what he wanted to do to keep his profile where it is. But by the same token, if everyone that's on this call actually wants to make a difference, the way they do it is to contribute to those candidates that can make a difference and actually are going to be able to get out there and win.
Yeah, this is Rod, and I agree with what Gary said. I think the original question was, how can you spend $3 million in a Senate race in Wyoming? Well, just keep writing checks until it's gone. A candidate can spend more than that if they want to, and it goes to huge, big TV buys where every half hour there's a minute commercial from a candidate on every channel you turn your television to. They're constantly on the radio. There are paid ads in all the newspapers. They have a highly paid staff. They pay outside polling organizations to run their polls for them. It's not hard to spend $3 million if you really put your mind to it, obviously, because it was done. But again, to echo Gary, nobody wants to disarm. But at the same time, candidates like Trauner and I have to be intellectually honest with each other and say, we're not going to play that game in order to beat a guy that's playing that game. There has to be a disconnect somehow, and it has to be done with people who are willing to do more with less to make up for $1 million with $1 million worth of effort and smarts and people-to-people contact. You'll notice that over the past couple of years, all of the congressional delegation, Barrasso, Enzi, and Cheney, have just been smoked for not coming back to Wyoming and doing town halls regularly when they had a chance to. They're all getting big strips of hide ripped off of them. That is an investment that a candidate who gets elected should make. Should come back to the state, hear from people in town halls, let them take a bite out of your hide, explain what you've done, explain what they want done, rather than just spend $3 million and say, okay, I don't have to do this again for another 6 years or 2 years. Now, I might interject that getting dark money out of politics, I think, is only one step in the process. I believe we also need to take steps to close the revolving door between retired politicians and huge corporations that hire them to lobby their interests on the Hill. At the same time, I think term limits is something we need to look at, because a safe seat in Congress can raise $5 million, spend $2 million retaining that seat, and if you're in the House of Representatives, you do the work of the people who elected you for a year, and then you spend the next year raising money. So getting rid of dark money, I think, is an essential step, but we also need to close that revolving door between Congress and the executive branch, and also really look at limiting terms. Again, that's my sermon.
Rob the Republican and Gary the Democrat, it's amazing how similar we sound, isn't it? And that's because I think we're both willing to use common sense. I tell people, I'm doing a listening tour around the state, and I ask people, when's the last time you saw a federal candidate who was willing to answer any question from any person, anytime, unscripted, unscreened, and give them an honest answer? And, to me, I tell people the one thing that I guarantee I will never do is become a lobbyist. If I'm lucky enough and honored enough to get to D.C., is become a lobbyist when I am done. End of story. Not going to happen. And we do need to legislate that away. I mean, that's critically important. And I also think no one should be in the Senate for 30 or 40 years. I mean, that's also, something that just should never happen. And you got Dianne Feinstein running for the Senate in California, and if she wins, she'll be 94 years old at the end of her term. Honestly, it's time for her to go home and hang out with her great-grandkids or grandkids or whoever, and let some younger folks take over, because there's always fresh blood that can do that. So, Rod's right. You can spend money, and you do. Frankly, it is expensive to run TV. Let me tell you one of the dirty little secrets about Washington, D.C. They have this thing for campaigns called call time, right? It's assigned call time, where you are assigned by, if you're in Congress, you're assigned by the leader of your caucus. If you're not, you're a candidate, where you have someone who sits next to you by a phone, and you spend the assigned time 3 hours a day, maybe 4 hours a day, and you dial for dollars. And what I tell people is you can be knowledgeable, you can have the wherewithal to run the race, you can be able to quit your job and run full time, which is what I've had to do in order to try and be successful. You can have the desire, you can have all the attributes it takes to be a good candidate and, frankly, a good legislator in the House or the Senate. And the single determining factor in whether you are a viable candidate or not is your ability to call people in cities far away that you've never met and never talked to and convince them to give you money. That's just a fact of our system right now. And so if you want to change that, it's going to take a Herculean effort, and it's going to take a lot of people stretching out and stepping up and supporting people like Rod and I, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Gary and Rod, for those comments, especially too. Yeah, this is again Shelby Shadwell, Treasurer of Wyoming Promise, and we have Democratic candidate challenging John Barrasso on the call, and we have Republican candidate Rod Miller challenging Liz Cheney in the primary on the call, and Ken Chestek is also unmuted. He's our chair of Wyoming Promise. We still have people joining the call. This is a big one, so we really appreciate these guest speakers on here. I would ask, Ken, do you have any questions at this point for either of the candidates, or any follow-ups?
Not at this point. Are there other people with questions?
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you didn't have anything else, I thought we could open it up to questions. So everybody else is call. And if anybody does have a question, just press a number on your dial pad, and we can open it up to the candidates. So I see at this point Melody Nielsen has her hand up, and we will unmute Melody at this point for a question for either or both candidates. Melody, you're unmuted.
I have to say that this is not a question. This is an invite. They're fabulous. Everything they're saying is wonderful. I am, of course, the leader in Laramie County, but I'm also the vice chair of Wyoming Alliance. And in June, we will be doing a Wyoming Promise Forum at the Cottonwood in Cheyenne. And, of course, Ken and Shelby will be there and on the forum. And I was hoping that maybe listening to what both Gary and Rod have said, they would be wonderful on the forum. Would they be interested in being on the forum?
Melody, this is Rod. Yeah, the answer is yes. Can you give me the date again?
This is June 7th.
June 7th? Yes. That's normally my tuba lesson, but I'll cancel my tuba lesson and come to your forum. I would be happy to do that.
That would be fabulous. And, of course, I'll give you time to decide, Gary. I don't know if Joe has. Hello?
If I may just jump in real quick, Millie, I would love to be there as well. I will tell you that while I am a candidate for U.S. Senate, first and foremost, I am a father, and I believe my son is graduating from high school on June 9th. So, unfortunately, it may be tough for me, but I'll see what I can do. I've got family coming in, grandparents and stuff. It's a big deal, and I think I'd be hard-pressed to miss that one.
Okay, we will do a lot of publicity, and there will be usually the paper, or this year we're going to try to get the TV. So there will be a lot of things happening. But as far as I have talked to Rod also about the congressional forum, the congressional town hall we are doing on June 14th. And I have invited Rod previously when I went to his town hall. And this is a congressional forum that will have everybody that is running against Barrasso and Cheney. And you are both invited to that. It's in the same place, the Cottonwood, and it will be on the 14th.
Well, I think that will probably be a little bit more manageable for me, but we'll do our best. Anything that I can get to that promotes this issue is something that I want to attend. But like I said, unfortunately, sometimes family comes first.
And thank you, Melody, and again, Rod and Gary, candidates here on the call with us. I did accidentally put everyone's hands down that did have a question. So if you did have a question earlier, please raise your hand again. But until then, I'm going to go to Joe. I have Joe who has their hand up, and I'm unmuting Joe.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mel. This is Joe. I'm the chair of the Wyoming Alliance here in Laramie County. And the town hall meeting on June 14th is, I think, very important for both you guys to attend. We will be inviting Cheney and Barrasso. Last year we did town hall meetings, and when they didn't show up, we put their pictures on chairs. It's going to be a Q&A. It's going to be a Q&A, and if they don't come this year, we're going to do the same thing. So if you guys show up and they don't, they will be officially invited. They don't, the pictures will go on the chairs again so that people can address their concerns to them as well as to you guys. It'll be, like I said, a Q&A, so we're going to hopefully have lots of citizens asking you guys questions about why you should take their place. So,
Joe, this is Rod. Yeah, I'll be there now. There's a recently announced Democrat running for Liz's seat. Travis is coming. Good. I want to make sure you extend that invitation to him too.
Yeah, I've already spoke to him personally.
All right, great.
So
I have also spoken to Travis.
Invite to you as well, sir.
Yeah, this is Ken. I've also spoken to Travis, and he is also very much interested in this issue. He knows the evil of money in politics, and he is going to be a supporter of what we're trying to accomplish.
Great.
And I'll chime in here. This is Shelby again. I definitely sympathize with candidate Trauner, Gary Trauner. I'm a father myself and got 2 kids, young kids, and along with Ken and us here at the state leadership level, we're 100% volunteer, grassroots. I don't get paid for anything, neither does Ken. And so there's a lot of things that go on, and it's hard work what we're doing. It really is hard work, and I do want to just interject really quick and just say thank you to everybody who is on the call and volunteering your time, because it's a huge effort, and that goes back to what Rod and Gary were saying about, running a campaign with very limited resources. Fortunately, Wyoming Promise, we raised money, and we've got great volunteers across the state, but it is a challenge to do all this. So thanks again, everybody, for joining this call. I do want to keep opening this up for questions. Again, I think I accidentally deleted a couple of hands that were up. But if you do have a question and I haven't called on you, feel free to press 1 on your dial pad or any number on your dial pad, and we can address your question for the candidates. And we do want to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. The candidates have time constraints and considerations, as does everyone. And the last 10 minutes of this hour-long call will be for just notes on how the statewide effort is going, I think. So if anybody does have a question, please press a number on your dial pad, and we'll address it, and you can speak with the candidate. So we have George here. You are unmuted. Please feel free to speak your piece.
Thank you very much. I'm from Cody. I was county chairman for 8 years. I've been in national conventions and a bunch of Republican stuff. I got to tell you, I moved a long ways from where Trump is. I'm concerned about a number of things. One of them is I hear Liz Cheney and Barrasso talk about Wyoming values. I wish somebody would try to describe what they believe Wyoming values are. I would think that there should be honesty maybe first, and if you look at the national Republicans, they're not even close to being honest. And I'm talking character. And then I look at the whole United case that has made the corporations run our country. Now, somebody has to do something about that, but Barrasso and Enzi and Cheney sure aren't doing anything, are they? Republicans need to get somebody doing something. I look at Pruitt, that's the EPA guy. He's ruining America, although he wants everybody to think he's doing something for coal. Well, coal's not the answer, you guys. Republicans shouldn't be saying coal's the answer. Natural gas is coming on. And this whole thing about China and all that, and North Korea at this stage, Trump has no idea about how to use the State Department to first educate himself about the psychology, the history, the culture, and all that, about how to deal with somebody from North Korea or China. I mean, it's like a 4th grader going into some big important business meeting. He doesn't know anything. So I'm just real concerned that we need to push reasonable and realistic and good policies on every issue. I'm so sick of this Republican thing that Trump's come up with that, we watch the news every day. He lies about every single thing. He's not a Republican, frankly, but I'm not sure what a Republican is. Does anybody know? Come up with...
Well, maybe I could... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to jump in maybe because you asked a big question about Wyoming values, and I think that's critical. And I think this race should, my race, and, I assume Rod too, but I'll let him speak to it. It should be about Wyoming values. And, there's several of them, but I'll talk about a couple of them that I talk about. One of them I say is neighborliness, right? So one of our values is we take care of our neighbors. If you're spreading hay and you don't have enough hands on the ranch, your neighbor's going to come over and help you out. If there's a sick kid, you have a friend or even a neighbor who's got a sick kid, you're going to come on over, and my wife, she'll make a dinner for them and bring it on over to help try and make things a little bit easier, right? To me, neighborliness at the national level means that we are willing to talk to each other no matter what our labels are on our chest, D or R or I or whatever. But it also means that, you know what, we take care of each other. We take care of the senior citizens, which means Social Security and Medicare, right? And we have health insurance for everybody in this country, affordable health insurance, and we don't allow big corporations, big for-profit insurers to determine what our policies are instead of looking at what's right for regular people. So that's, to me, one of the Wyoming values that I would talk about. And as I said earlier in my call, I say find people that have leadership skills and integrity. And I don't care what party they are, vote for them, because we don't have that up in Washington, D.C. right now. And I think, back to my quote about what George Washington in 1796 in his farewell address, right? If we allow people to hide behind their labels, their party labels, look, politicians may be dumb, but they're not stupid, right? And they know that they can go back to their hometown and say, I'm an R, vote for me, and they're going to get people to vote for them, right? And it allows them to hide behind their label, and they go, as I say, they say one thing, they do another, and they hope nobody's paying attention. They just passed a huge tax bill, and I liken it to raising our allowance on our kids, giving them instant gratification, but taking the money out of their college fund to do that. And when it's time for them to go to college, there's no money left. So we're borrowing against our future another $2 trillion of debt to make people feel a little bit better about themselves today, to buy their votes. And by the way, that tax cut's temporary, while the corporations and wealthy heirs are getting permanent tax cuts. That is about 85 or 90% of the tax cut. So I hear what you're saying. The answer is to talk to your neighbors, is to get in uncomfortable conversations and help them become educated about what's going on in D.C. and make sure that they vote for change, because that's the only way it's going to happen.
Thank you, Candidate Gary Towner.
Let me jump in. I think Gary did a great job describing Wyoming values. George, I'll be up in Cody on the 25th for the dinner, and I hope we get a chance to shake and howdy. But let me touch on your concerns about the Republican Party. I've never been anything but a Republican, nor will I ever be. But like you, I don't recognize my party right now. A generation ago, the Republican Party described itself as a big tent with room for everybody in it. And today, I don't think the Republican Party is anything much more than this tiny little blanket fort that won't let anybody but rich guys in, and they sit there in the dark and say Obama's going to come take our guns. That's not the Republican Party I grew up with. That's not the Republican Party of Thaddeus Stevens or Lincoln or Eisenhower or and Barry Goldwater. God bless his crusty old hide, is one of my Republican heroes, because he was the only member of Congress during Watergate who had the cojones to walk into Nixon's office when he saw the damage that was being done to the country. And Nixon was the leader of his party at that time. And Goldwater walked into his office alone and said, Mr. President, it's time for you to go. And that convinced Nixon to resign. We're missing that statesmanship. We're missing that inclusiveness in the party. And quite frankly, we are missing our ability to reason about the really critical issues that face the country. And instead, we're relying on these 10-second sound bites that you can tweet and just stake out a position on an extreme end of an issue. So, George, I agree with you. Part of the reason I'm running is not just to win a seat in Congress, but I want to show the Republican Party that you don't have to behave like that to win.
If I could just jump in quickly, too. This is Ken. I just wanted to say one thing pertinent to this discussion. There's two reasons why I've chosen this as my mission, why I'm doing this work. One is the issue itself. Till we solve the problem of money in politics, we can't solve any other problem. This is issue number one for me. But the other reason, and it's almost equally as important, is that this is so bipartisan. Our country is so bitterly divided. We can't even talk to each other anymore. And that is destroying our country, it's destroying our values. But this is a completely nonpartisan issue. And I love the fact that if we can do this together, we can work together and solve this problem together, maybe other nonpartisan issues we can figure out, yes, we can work together. We can get things done when we work together, and the R's and the D's don't matter so much. And that's another reason why I'm doing this work, and I hope that's why a lot of you on the call, we have a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats, a lot of independents doing this work with us. And I think it's so critically important to focus on the fact that this is a completely nonpartisan issue.
This is Rod. Let me jump in just a quick second and recommend that you and the people on the call get a copy of Dick Cheney's Kings of the Hill, written by Dick and Lynn when Dick was in Congress. And he took a look at the major players in Congress throughout history and how they influenced the country. And he focuses in on Nick Longworth. When Nick Longworth was Speaker of the House, the minority leader was Cactus Jack Garner from Texas. He was a Democrat. And every morning for 2 years, Longworth and Cactus Jack Garner rode to work together in Longworth's car. And they spent that hour, half hour, whatever, just talking about the business of the House, what needed to be done, how could they work together to further the work of the country. And this was like coming out of the Great Depression right before World War II. That spirit of cooperation and bipartisanship is completely absent today, and we need to get it back.
Yes, indeed. I would agree with that. This is Shelby Shadwell again. I'm kind of conducting the call, and I want to thank the candidates on here. We do have time maybe for one or two more questions if anybody is interested in asking a question to these candidates on this issue or anything else. You can press any number on your dial pad, and that will raise your hand, and we can unmute you, and you can ask folks a question. And then for the last part of this call, because we're mindful of everyone's time, we really appreciate all the volunteers across the state that are dedicating your time to this ballot initiative and collecting signatures. We'll give you an update on what's going on at the state level. But I do want to throw it over to Lynn Horton-Morrison, who is unmuted now. If, Lynn, you have a question for either of the candidates or anything like that, feel free.
Thank you very much, Shelby. So I just want to say thank you so much to both of you, Mr. Trauner and Mr. Miller, for being part of this effort. I think you can tell by everybody that has asked a question, as well as Ken and Shelby and myself, I'm the third leg of the committee of applicants. I'm the vice chair of Wyoming Promise. You can really tell how much we all agree, and we're passionate about this. Here's my question. One of the things that I've found, as all of us are in parallel racing towards November, so those of us on the petition drive are racing to get over 38,000 signatures, more like 45 to 50,000 signatures to get this petition through, as well as getting a good representation from counties. We need to have a representation of, 2/3 of our counties making meeting a 15% threshold of registered voters. But, we have other people, valuable people like you, that both of you being very articulate, smart, understanding history, understanding the issues, connected to the community, believing in Wyoming values. You're also racing towards the same goal. And I'm wondering, and of course both of us too are operating on shoestrings. And so, what can we do together over the next 5 to 6 months, that could actually help both of our causes? Because really we've got parallels in everything, and yet what I see happening is we need to, I think, do a better job of binding together. I think that would actually get a real message out to the Wyoming voters, and that would probably help both of us and be more synergistic than us, just working along our own individual paths. So whatever, I'm glad to take whatever answers from both of you. Thank you.
Gary, you want to go first?
Thanks, Rod. Sure, absolutely. So, Lynn, that's a tough question. And at the end of the day, to me, last time I ran 10, 12 years ago, for those of you that remember, I went door to door. I knocked on 25,000 plus doors, literally myself, trying to meet people in Wyoming. And what you find out, unfortunately, is that a lot of people are not educated about issues. They're just not up to snuff or up to speed on really what's going on in the race that you're running. So, there's two things that can be done. I mean, one of them, obviously, and again, I hate to say it, but I'm a realist, is small dollar donations. It's money, right? That's absolutely, we want to get the message out, but you can't do that unless you have the resources to do that. But secondly, and maybe just as importantly, is the ability to network across the state and have every single person on this call stretch themselves, perhaps in more uncomfortable ways than they're used to talk to friends and neighbors and coworkers and help them see that, unless they are willing to step up and vote for people that want to follow the path that we're talking about today, which I think is a less partisan path, which is a path that doesn't include big corporate money, that nothing is going to change for the better. And, I'll make an argument that our current president tapped into a vein, and we ignored that vein at our own peril. And he tapped into a very similar vein that Bernie Sanders tapped into. And that is, for most people, this system is not really working very well anymore. It's not working for them. It works for a very small slice of people. When we talk about the economy growing at 3 or 4% of GDP, but all of that growth goes to a very small slice of people at the top, to me, that's not working for really anybody. It's not going to work. And in the long run, if you look at history, cultures and societies fall over inequality, over too much inequality. So, Lynn, I think it's a matter of trying to make sure people become educated and that you spend as much, if you care, and the folks on this call care, talking to people and helping them to understand what it takes and why it's important to look at different candidates and become educated and not just go party line on either side, but to stand up for people that have leadership and integrity and have Wyoming values and aren't going to be bought and paid for.
Rod, do you have anything?
Let me second what Gary said, and I think I speak for both of us when I offer our thanks to you, the people who are on this call and the people that are getting a petition out there and working hard to overturn Citizens United. How can we work together? Everything Gary said. You guys are going to be in a tight spot. You can't endorse or favor a particular candidate publicly because your credibility is on the line as an organization. I don't think either one of us would expect you to do that. Speaking for me, anytime I have a meet and greet or I get together a room full of folks, you have a standing offer to have a table and some volunteers there to get some signatures on the petition. As well, if you guys, I have no problem whatsoever sharing and copying your information on my campaign Facebook page and website. And what I might ask you to do is if you can come up with a 200-word blurb on overturning Citizens United, getting dark money out of politics, Wyoming Promise, send that to me, and I will put that in the issue section of my website. I'll just cut and paste it in there because I probably should have said something about that myself, but I didn't. So let me offer that to you. I think we keep working together. Realistically, if I get 50,000 votes on August 21st in the primary, I'll probably beat Liz. So we're kind of working toward the same numeric goal, 45,000, 50,000 people that we need to reach. And being as personal a state as Wyoming is, I think we're just the kids to do it. So, again, as Gary said, if you guys want to spread our message out among your network of friends and associates, fine. We're not going to talk you out of doing that. If you want to give people the message that we're living on small donations because we're not going to take that big money, fine, do that. I can't ask you to do that, but I will actively help you guys because I can do that. and not get in trouble.
You know, one quick thing, just really super quick. I want to go back to something at the very beginning before we end, the candidates end. And that is that Rod talked about the way that we're going to get rid of Citizens United, and he wants a constitutional amendment to change that. And I don't disagree with that. I think that would be a great thing. But there is another path, and that path is to have a Senate that advises and consents on Supreme Court justice appointments, and to have a Senate that is not going to appoint or approve any Supreme Court justice that thinks that money equals speech and that corporations are U.S. citizens. And so there is another path, right? And that means changing the Senate. And that's one of the reasons I'm running.
I think that's
Bingo.
actually a great comment.
Yeah.
It's a great comment, Gary, and thanks, Rod, also for those comments. I think at Wyoming Promise here, we're an all of the above strategy. I mean, if we get a Supreme Court will do it, that's great. I just don't want to wait 30 or 40 years necessarily. So we want to put pressure on all sides to get it done as soon as possible. But we do really appreciate all your comments on this and appreciate your support of Wyoming Promise. Again, we can't endorse candidates. We do not do that, but we do welcome candidates to speak in support of this issue on our platform. So we're getting together a supporters page on our website especially, and that's a ongoing thing. Again, we are a grassroots shoestring volunteer effort, as many campaigns are. But I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for being on this call and sharing your thoughts on this issue. We can't thank you enough for volunteering your time. And I want to throw it over to Ken Chestak if he has any other questions or concerns or anything else he wants to say on this call.
No, other than I do want to thank both of the candidates for their insights and their hard work and their dedication to this issue. I think we are all in agreement that money in politics is the root of all evil, and we need to eradicate that before we can get anything else done. I do invite both candidates, if you want to stick around for a few more minutes and listen in. I want to wrap up the call here with a little bit of just a few announcements, and also take any questions that there might be from people about the effort generally that aren't directed to the candidates. The first thing I wanted to say is that we had a great event in Cody a few weeks ago. Senator Al Simpson, who's also been a leader in this effort for a long time, brought in 200 people to a room. I did a talk in Cody a year ago at the library on this issue. I got 15 people to attend. We did a talk on the same issue with Al Simpson on the dais. We had 200 people show up. So Al's a big supporter, and he brought in a huge crew, very well attended, great session. Al's doing it again. He's doing another event in Sheridan on May 15th or May 17th at 7 p.m. And we're going to live stream that, probably live stream it directly to YouTube, and we're working out the details, the technical details of that. But we will have that available for a viewing party. If you can't make it to Sheridan, it's going to be at Sheridan College at 7 o'clock on the 17th of May. If you can't make it there in person, you can watch the live stream, and we do encourage all of the county teams to set up watch parties. Bring your teams in, get some beer, get some coffee, whatever beverage you choose, and watch the live stream. And then you can talk among your team, what do we do next? How do we take this energy that Al brings with him every time he speaks and take it out to the streets to get more signatures and get this thing going? So I encourage you all to do that. Also, if you are a county team leader on this call, or somebody who wants to think about stepping up to that level the day after that event in Sheridan on May 18th, on Friday, we're going to have a statewide leadership retreat, and where we're going to actually sit down, roll up our sleeves, get the maps out, sharpen our pencils, look at our numbers, and start coming up with concrete plans, county by county. What are we doing? how we're going to get this done, what needs to be done. So please, if you are able to attend the leadership retreat on Friday, May 18th in Sheridan, the day after the Al Simpson talk, please let me know, and we're happy to have you join the conversation. And it's time to saddle up, folks. We got to get this done, and the weather's breaking. Spring has sprung, and it's time to hit the streets. So those are the two things I wanted to comment on. Shelby, what else do you have to say?
No, I'll just chime in there and say, again, to what the candidates were actually saying on this call too, this is not a hard ask. I mean, we're not, this is a cross-partisan issue all the way. 90% of Americans, when you ask them, and this is in documented polls, USA Today, et cetera, 90% of Americans think money has an outsized influence on our political and election system. And we need to get free and fair elections. We need to do it, and we got to do it here in Wyoming too, as well as other states. And it's not a hard ask. That's what my experience is in circulating. I do want to throw out, or I do want to allow Joe Ramirez here to speak again with his hand up to make a comment. But before that, I do want to say, get in touch with me. I volunteer my time. I'm all volunteer, and I'm going on 1,000+ hours here of volunteer effort over the last year and a half, and I'm happy to do it. I'm proud to do it. I'm doing it for Wyoming, the state I love. So, and I hope you all will continue your efforts. I know this is a roller coaster. I know things get tough, and then they get good, and then they get tough again. But that's democracy, and so I hope you'll all stay in contact with me if you need anything at all, especially. But Joe, you have your hand up. Please feel free to make a
just real quick, guys. We are co-hosting the watch party from Sheridan in Cheyenne, so ourselves and Promise will be in Cheyenne watching that. So we're trying to promote it really well so that we get a good crowd.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joe, very much. I know there's also efforts going around across the state that have to do with this issue as well. I mean, there's the Wyo Say No campaign about private prisons. I don't necessarily believe in private prisons at all. That should be something maybe that the state should do rather than a private company, for sure. And, there's other issues out there in the state, but this one connects all of them. I do want to open it up real quick to Lynn again. Lynn, you're unmuted for a comment or question.
I just want to make the comment that in getting ready for the statewide retreat in Sheridan on Friday, May 18th. One is a comment and the other is a question. What we are trying to do, this is going to be a very strategic day-long meeting, and what we're trying to accomplish is looking at the counties that we need to focus our efforts on. And in order to do that in a meaningful way, we need to have the data back. So even if those of you county team leaders or volunteer petition gatherers don't have completely filled packets, you need to get your packet to your county team leader or your data manager over the next 10 days to 2 weeks and get that in so that we have a starting point that's an accurate starting point at the beginning of that meeting, and we can see, okay, where are our strengths, where do we need to concentrate our efforts over the next several months. So that part's vitally important. I have two questions. One's for Shelby, one's for Ken. Shelby, my friend, I'd like to know how many people were on the call, if you know. That would be great for everyone to know so we can see what a great turnout we had. And then Ken, if you could, I don't know if we know yet where that retreat is going to be, if you can speak to that. Thank you.
I'll chime in there. We had at least, I would say, 30 people on the call at any one time. Some folks have jumped off at this point. Again, time being a consideration. Could have been as much as 40 or 50. I mean, we had a lot of folks on the call. But we will get that data out to at least the committee of applicants. A lot of folks on the call, which is great, really amazing. And we're really proud of that. And we will do hopefully this call is being recorded. We're pretty sure it is. I'm not as tech savvy as I was when I was a youngster, but hopefully things are getting recorded now, and we will get a recap recording of this call out to all volunteers so that everybody can hear it. Ken, do you want to chime in on the other question?
Yes, we don't have the location pinned down yet. I have made contact with a group that has space that would be suitable. Have not yet gotten a response back from them, so we'll let you know as soon as I finalize the location. I should have that hopefully within the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are wrapping up here. I do want to actually, since we do still have Rod and Gary on the call, I do want to give them maybe the last words here before we get off the actual call. So Rod and Gary, maybe Rod, you go first. Gary, you go second. We've got you both on the call. If you have any final thoughts you want to leave to constituents or possible constituents, feel free to say any final thought.
This is Rod. And I guess my message to you is just stay strong. I'll bet you $1 to a donut. The Wyoming power structure, as it stands now, is not having a call like this tonight. They are complacent. The things that they have done in the past, they believe that they will work in the future. And it's our job to disabuse them of that notion. At the risk of sounding like a Democrat, I'm going to quote Che Guevara, my favorite revolutionary, who said that a true revolutionary is motivated, first of all, by great feelings of love. And if we love each other, if we love our state, if we love democracy, we're willing to take the lumps and keep on charging. Good on you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate the time
so much
to spend with you. And Gary Crowner, it's always a pleasure, young man.
I don't know about young man, but, I'll just keep it short. Two things. First one is I am proud to share the microphone and the platform with Rod Miller anytime. And secondly, I think it's what Rod said. You know what? Keep the faith. Get out the vote, register, help people get to the polls, educate them. And, if it's one trait, it's tenacity, it's stick-to-itiveness. And if we can do that together on the same issue, we'll be just fine. And I really appreciate the time, folks.
Well, thanks to both of you so much. Fantastic call.
Again, we really appreciate both candidates being on this call. It's amazing to have them on, and encourage other candidates as you see them on the campaign trail to look us up, and we'll have them on too if they support what we're doing. So thank you all. Again, it's a roller coaster, and but I think we're looking at on the up and up. So thanks everybody for joining this call. I'll have a recap email out with a recording of this call that we can share with all volunteers across the state. So thank you all so much, and keep the faith. Stay strong. That's the main thing. Stay strong, and you are strong. That's for sure. So thank you all. We'll end it here. Thank you so much.